Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining me. We have lots to talk about regarding your psychology today, and we're going to do it in a super manly way. That's what I am. I'm super manly. Well, that's what you do when you're insecure about your masculinity or manhood, is you just join a profession that is completely devoid of all masculinity, like psychology, and then you feel really good about your masculinity all of a sudden. Like, oh man, I feel great about myself. Like if you're really fat, don't lose weight. Just go hang out with other fat people. Go to a swap meet. Get really into 1970s American muscle cars. That's what you do if you're a fat guy. And then you start to feel really thin all of a sudden. That's what I did. I was insecure about my manhood, so I just got into psychology. And wow, I'm really tough now. I feel really good, man. Masculinity though, but it's strange because I think that psychology, everybody says this. No, actually figure skating is really manly. That's what every male figure skater says who isn't gay, which is about two of them. Oh, the figure skating is really manly. It's very difficult, actually. There's probably a male synchronized swimming team. It's actually more difficult than football. We have a higher VO2 max than football. Dude, relax. It's just not it's like, have fun doing it. I'm sure it's difficult. Synchronized swimming, I'm sure it's difficult. Doesn't make it manly. That's what I do with psychology. But given that, I do think that there is a masculine. Psychology is fundamentally masculine when you look at it from a certain perspective. I would argue at the correct perspective. From a depth psychology perspective, right? You go into the unconscious. You go into the abyss. You confront the fears, all the resistances that come up, figure out, that one gold nugget of wisdom that you need and how to apply it to your life. Like that's what psychology is. It's a very, St. George taking his sword out and stabbing the dragon, as I talk about in my ebook. That's what psychology is. And I think that it is faltering to some degree because it lacks masculinity. Now, psychology needs femininity too. It needs both. It needs the empathy. It needs the connection, but it also needs the conceptualization, understanding what's really going on. Like structure out what is going on with your emotional issues. And that's what I think I bring to the table in part. I'm not the only therapist, psychologist who talks about that. There's other guys out there saying we're making psychology manly again. This is psychology for men. Hey, it's manly to talk about your feelings. I'm not the only one doing that, but I am the only one discussing. Well, there's actually a definite structure to this. A structure to your emotions, how they operate, how they create your identity, and how awareness of this whole process adds to growth in general. I'm the only one doing that. I'm doing a bunch of other smart things here. So let's see what I have to talk about today. What do I have to talk about today? Oh yeah, lots. I was on a trip this past week, and so I watched Rear Window, an old Alfred Hitchcock movie with Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart on an airplane. From 1954, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite parts about 1984 is that they kept referring to, I forget exactly what they call it. My wife just read it. We were talking about it. Before time, like the time before the revolution. They had a name for it, and everybody kept talking about the before time. I'm just going to call it that. I don't think that's what actually it's called in 1984. There was this before time, though, and it was terrible. No specifics. Nothing, nobody really talks about what was going on in this before time, before the revolution, before the socialist revolution, but it was bad. Oh, it was bad, and it's so much better now. And I'm watching 1984, and I'm thinking about feminism and Grace Kelly's character in this movie, and also the housekeeper. So I think you pretty much know, you've seen Bart of Darkness, right? Okay. That's 1984. Jimmy Stewart's character, he's a photographer, and he was filming this car race, and there was a crash, and he broke his leg and hip, and so now he's in his wheelchair, with a cast around his leg and hip for the next 6 weeks or 7 weeks. And so he's just sitting, he's in New York City apartment. So he's just sitting and looking, and he thinks he sees a murder. And he's trying to convince the police chief about it, or the lieutenant, but he doesn't understand because there's no evidence. But it's his girlfriend, Grace Kelly, who helps him out, his girlfriend and housekeeper. Because he's in a cast, because he can't move. I mean, what's the symbolism of that, right? You are in this car crash because you were being stupid. Your masculinity, your need to get the best possible photo. And there's even a little reference, and he's talking to his boss in the beginning of the movie. He didn't even need to be in that position. But his stupidness, his male stupidness, got him in a wheelchair, immobilized. He now needs the help of his housekeeper and his girlfriend to figure out if this guy that he's peering at across the alleyway did indeed murder his wife. And the way that his housekeeper and his girlfriend act, it's unbelievable. Like, they're smart, they're capable, they're intuitive. They pick up on little facts before the police lieutenant does. Like Mr. Buzzcut, right? Like, he doesn't get it. He's out of touch. But the women are there to help him and pick up on facts and use their intuition. Their feminine intuition. That's a microaggression now. Brave. Grace Kelly's character is brave. Like, she does this stunt where she climbs from the fire escape into the window of this potential murder. Like, this guy could be a murderer, and she's climbing in. And even Jimmy Stewart, her boyfriend's like, oh God, don't do that. That's too scary. This is 1954. What before time? Yeah, that's whenever somebody brings up feminism, how terrible women were portrayed. They're always portrayed as weak. No, we need Rey in Star Wars to have more testosterone than an IFBB level bodybuilder to make women feel secure. No, put up this representation of women being strong so now our daughters can feel strong. Go back 65 years. Look at how women were portrayed. I mean, it's amazing. What were we fighting against? Right? I mean, it's just like in 1984. What were they fighting against? That's what makes it so creepy, I think, in the book, is it's so vague. It's so indefinite. Oh, we were just oppressed. It was terrible back then. Don't even question it. You can't even question in 1984 that it's better now since the revolution. Can't even question that. Were women really portrayed that negatively? I mean, this is 10 years, or at least 5 years before any kind of, marching in the streets for equal rights. And I know there are some specific things that happen because of feminism. Like, now a woman doesn't need a husband to sign a mortgage or something. That, obviously, nobody has a problem with that. But did you have to reinvent? Did you have to reimagine how the genders are and what they need to do to be capable in this world? Did you have to make women into men effectively, give them high testosterone traits, praise them because of those high testosterone traits, ultimately more misogynist than any sort of damsel in distress? Oh, I'm so helpless without a man. Way more misogynist than that. What's going on though, right? I mean, Jeff, that's his name, Jeff. Jimmy Stewart's character clearly needs these women more than he needs them, more than they need them. They need him. Excuse me. That doesn't make him bad. That doesn't make him stupid in any way. But these three characters in this movie need each other. Wow. Yeah, she's vulnerable, That's a part they can never show today, which every woman goes through. Makes her completely relatable. She's vulnerable. She needs a man in her life. She wants to marry Jimmy Stewart. But he doesn't know whether she's right for him. I'm this photographer. I travel around the world. Can you fit in with my life? But she's hurt because of that. She understands what she's hurt. And she has other male suitors. It's hinted that she has other male suitors, but she's lonely because there's one that she likes. She's a little bit vulnerable. She's kind of a real person now. She's portrayed as a real human being, not even a real woman. She has vulnerabilities. Couldn't do that now. And that's so sad. Yeah, you want to put an image up on screen that you want your little girls to relate to. Well, they got to be relatable. If you want them to relate, they got to be a real thing. They can't just be this projection to cover up this supposed weakness of femininity. Again, it's ultimately misogyny. I was just blown away. And I know I've talked about this before. This is one movie from 1940 I saw. I'm not going to go into it because I don't remember any of the details. But this is what brainwashing is, in a sense. You were so bad before. I mean, this is Stockholm Syndrome. This is what captors do to, their kidnapping victims. Kidnappers? Did I say stalkers? This is what kidnappers do to their kidnapping victims, is they groom them to be part of their family. They tell them how bad it was before. How bad their life was, and how much nicer it is now. Oh, all these perceived things that are negative, supposedly negative things, they're actually good things. Because look how bad it was back then. No, you're wrong. It wasn't better back then. No, women were oppressed. They were oppressed across the board. Grace Kelly's character has a job. She's successful. She doesn't need the man for money or anything. She needs him for love and affection because she's a woman. And that's good. Anyway. Whose fault is it, though? Nobody knows. I hear this all the time. There's no good girls. Girls now are undateable because of feminism, right? Because of what I was just complaining about. Women are undateable. Man, this is a very fascinating thing, because whenever somebody says this to me, and I've heard it a lot from a lot of different guys in a lot of different contexts, whenever somebody says women are undateable, I always ask, well, okay, what do you do to go meet a woman who's dateable? Okay, women are undateable. Where do you go find women who are dateable? And I always get the same response. Just nothing. You don't do anything. Can't even imagine that you would do something that you would actually put yourself in a position where you'd be more likely to meet a woman who's dateable. I mean, this is just like, yeah, this is the male version of a woman with an entire closet full of clothes. Oh, I have nothing to wear. There's nothing. Oh, I can't wear that. No, do you really not have anything to wear? No, you just don't like how you look in those clothes. Maybe you're fat. Maybe you have anxiety, self-esteem issues, and so you don't like how you feel about yourself around those clothes, or when you're in those clothes, right? Or yeah, even if you're in front of the fridge, you have a whole fridge full of food. Oh, I'm hungry, but there's nothing to eat. Well, then you're not really hungry. What are you using the food for? What are you using the clothes for? What are you using the woman for if you're sitting around complaining about that, how they're undateable? There's plenty to eat. But no, what you're looking for isn't to satiate hunger. You aren't looking for any nutritional value. You're looking for somebody to cover up your pain. Something. Some food. Some clothes in the closet. Some woman. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for a woman to cover up the pain. You don't want to look at that, though. You don't want to look at the fact that that's what's really going on. So you just project out your own insecurities as there's no good girls, or the fact that I'm not a good guy. Yeah, if I ever did get a girl who was dateable, it would expose my issue. It would expose the issue that I have, that I sit around complaining how there's no good girls, even though there's plenty of things you could do to go meet a woman. I mean, what are you thinking? You'd move across the country, across the world, for a stupid freaking job you don't even care about. You would just do it because, oh, it's cool to move to Germany for a job. You wouldn't do that for a job. But for a woman, you wouldn't go to a freaking, I don't know. You want a girl who's into working out? You go to the gym and talk to girls at the gym. Oh, I can't talk to a woman at the gym. They don't want to be bothered. Okay, that's your issue. Figure that out. That's your thing to work on. You want a girl who reads? Go to the library. There's plenty of girls who are into what you're into. No, you just go to the bar, go to a club. Yeah, you're not going to meet, not that you can't be a good girl, a good dateable girl, and obviously go to the bar and even get stupid drunk every once in a while, but that's not going to be the best bet for you. Before I met my wife, standing order was any girl who's reading, like out in public reading, whether it's in a coffee, wherever, the park, reading by herself or with a friend, I don't know, whatever. You talk to her. Does she weigh 400 pounds? I don't care. You talk to her. Am I going to date her because she weighs 400 pounds? Probably not, but that's the standing order. You make an effort. What do I want in a girl? I want a girl who, in her free time, would want to get out of her apartment, not just sit at home, get out of her apartment, read a book, and be amenable to a guy hitting on her, perhaps directly, perhaps obnoxiously. That's what I would want. That says everything correct about a girl who I would want. Now I could go to the bar and look at all there are, ridiculous women in, especially New York where I was. And and you can sit around and complain about that. Or is that a defense against your own pain? Do you want the candy bar instead of the steak? Healthiest food I can think of. You want the candy bar instead of the steak, not because you want nutritional value, but because you want to manage your pain. In a mature way, of course. There's nothing to wear. No, you just don't like how you look. You don't want to go and meet a girl who you'd want to date because you don't like how you would look with that girl. What if she had her life together more than you have? What if she was 6 years younger than you are and she had her life together more than you do? There'd be these parts of your life you don't want her to see, and that's why you don't go meet her. That's why you go to the bar and meet the tuned out, crazy feminist, because you don't care, because that doesn't reveal anything about you. And then you can go and get your payout, which is, of course, complaining about how there's no good girls. It's men's fault, right? It's men's fault. They're the leaders biologically. I know, that's offensive. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. But that's what testosterone is. If you could construct the perfect serum for leadership, it would be testosterone, right? Focus, energy, ability to take risks, right? That's what testosterone is. Get a freaking clue. Now, in general, are women a little bit, less amenable to dating and having a healthy relationship? Sure, but again, it goes back to the testosterone thing. Who has the penis? Who's the leader? Where does this really come from? The men sitting around complain about how there's no good girls to date. Oh, all these women are fat. Go to a freaking yoga class. And when the girl asks you, why are you here? You say you're there to meet a girlfriend. And if she has a problem with that, probably not a good girl you'd want in your life. Yes, I'm out in the world looking for a potential mate. If you think that's an issue, yeah. What's wrong with you? Anyway. I also was thinking, because I was traveling this past week, and there seems to be this trend in the Lifehacker community of I first noticed this when people started to microdose LSD or psilocybin because it made them more productive. Right? It was like, man, there's something going on there. You're microdosing this drug to make you more productive. I guess I just don't get it. So in the Lifehacker community, you can't waste time. You have to put the most value on your time possible. And traveling, going to the airport. What if the flight's delayed? It's like all this extra time doing something and you're not working. And it just makes you wonder, what even is work? It's like like religion. Let's see if this analogy works. Like in religion, so you know, religion and psychology complement each other. Psychology is just the next iteration of religion, but you weren't going to get psychology from sitting in a church thinking about Jesus or Moses or Abraham. Right? It wasn't going to. You weren't going to create a psychological field from that. Even though it complements religion, you weren't going to create it by sitting in a church. And that's how I feel about productivity. I mean, what is productivity? Is productivity sitting in your office with your schedule and email out and doing everything that you're supposed to do, that you were doing every day all the time? Or is it just looking at the world in a different way? Is it just rearranging the facts of reality? When it comes to productivity, if you can boil it down, I would just boil it down to perception. It is perception. And that's what traveling is. That's what traveling gives you. It is different perceptions of the world. Noticing. Going to a different culture, even if it's just in the United States. Geez, freaking working out at a different gym. Working out at the hotel gym. Or some gym down the street in the city where you are. Perception. What's going on here? What are they doing? You have to be at work, like with your email and laptop up. I don't like work on an airplane because the laptop, the way that makes my elbows. Who says you have to be in front of your laptop to be working? It's just perception. Like, focus on what's important. The development of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt, in his laboratory in the 1880s, that was doing way more for religion at the time in the long run. Effectively, it's going to be doing way more for religion than some guy in the priesthood, reading the Bible for the freaking millionth time, studying the same book everybody else has been studying for 3,000 years. Well, not that long. Reading or studying for 3,000 years. Who's doing more for the field of psychology/religion? Yeah, who's doing more for religion? Wilhelm Wundt and his essentially laboratory studies that went nowhere. But it was the process. It was, maybe we can look at this thing called psychology in a different way. And they weren't, at the time, they weren't even thinking what they were doing was similar to religion. Or that it was related or complementary in any way, but that's eventually where it led to. Yeah. Like, you think you need a specific structure for work, otherwise you're not working. Do you even like work? Do you even know, like what is work? What is productivity? What's efficiency? Is it being at the same place every day? Or is it just having an active mind? Is it just looking at things? Is it just going to the airport, driving? What's going on here? We're stuck at this intersection. Why isn't it working? A million opportunities. Just put yourself in a new situation. But you got to be thinking, right? I mean, obviously, if there's some business meeting or negotiation that you need to be there for, then you don't go on a trip. You stay there for the negotiation, right? If it's clearly something, obviously. You don't say, oh, no, I'm not going to be at this negotiation or this business meeting that's really important. I mean, most of them aren't, of course, but if it is important, like a negotiation, we're going to figure out some deal. Yeah, I'm not going to go on my vacation now. I'm going to stay to do that, but that's an obvious example. I don't know. I just had such a great time on this trip. It was for this wedding. I just had such a great time waking up in a new place. I had my notepad there. I was like thinking of ideas. I had all these new article ideas. I was thinking about this other thing that I'm working on. I was making notes on that. I was reading my book. That's really important to me. Just giving me this opportunity to do this. I'm thinking, man, am I more productive than I would be at home? I don't know. I don't know if I'm less productive. Who knows? History will decide. But I do know I'm being productive. I do know that my perceptions of reality and how I group those together, it's just coming together in a little bit different way because I took this 6-hour flight. Anyway. Yeah, you're taking psilocybin to be productive. Like for the specific purpose of being productive. Now, of course, unofficially, I endorse psilocybin. I think it can be really helpful. It can be helpful. It's not a replacement for anything else. It's not a replacement for therapy. It's definitely not a replacement for having friends and connections. You can't just take psilocybin. But I do think it's something that's very helpful to work in conjunction with that. And I do think in the long term, sure, it's going to make you more productive because it makes you more aware. You're allowed to see your life in a different way. It allows you the opportunity to do that, to see how you relate to things. I think it really helps for that and seeing how you can affect things. But just taking it to be productive, like you're just missing the point. You just don't get it. It's like, yeah, you don't get it, and you don't get that you don't get it. Oh, you care about being productive. There's no dichotomy between insight and productivity. There's no dichotomy between taking a vacation. It's not even a break. It's just changing the way you do things and productivity. I think it's just so much anxiety built up with guys like, oh, I got to be productive. I can't let a single moment go to waste, and that's very healthy. Put a lot of value on your time. But what exactly are you doing with that time? Or yeah, more specifically, what is productivity in the first place? It's efficiency. It's rearranging reality, looking at reality in a different way. That's what it is. That's the laundromat that all they do. It's the same freaking laundromat as all the other laundromats, but they put a little extra care into folding. And when you get your clothes back from that laundromat, it's going to be just 10% nicer. Like you have to be this like huge creative thing. Like you have to be Henry Ford or Bill Gates. I don't think everybody has the same innate level of creativity. Like we're not all Van Gogh, but everybody can be a little bit more creative, and that comes from just looking at reality, relating your experiences. All right. I got this comment a couple weeks ago. So I made this little offhand comment about trauma and war. And I look at the history of 20th century wars in America. And geez, it really seems to be a story of trauma. So I think I'm going to talk about that. And we're going to learn something about trauma. I don't have all these thoughts fully fleshed out, to be honest. But I'm just going to throw some things out there and see what you guys can... Maybe it'll help you see trauma in your own life and how to deal with it, and how America's been dealing with trauma for at least 100 years. I think it's an ingrained part of who we are. We act out on it now a lot, and I think a lot of it starts with war. I mean, a war, it's not the only source of trauma, I think, in the American public, but if you are going to traumatize an adult or do the thing that's going to be most likely to traumatize an even healthy adult, it's going to come from force. That's going to come from, well, we'll get to it, I guess. First, what is trauma? It's, look, stress happens. Like I get a bill in the mail, and that stress to some degree, that represents some kind of anxiety. I think the example I use in my book, it represents anxiety. But I know how to pay the bill, right? So I have the intellectual wherewithal or the emotional, psychological wherewithal to pay the bill. So that wouldn't really be trauma. Trauma is, and this is a very vague definition, it covers everything from like severe child abuse, physical, sexual abuse to something more anodyne. But trauma is when a stress happens to you, it comes into your boundary, as we would say, to use our terminology that we use around here and how we think about psychology. It comes into your boundary and you don't know how to manage it. You just didn't have the intellectual resources, the emotional, psychological resources to manage this stress that came into your boundary. So obviously an extreme example is a child being abused. A child doesn't have... Like if I went outside and like somebody just punched me, like it'd be like weird and uncomfortable. Like what? But I can manage that, right? Because I have this framework in my mind of, okay, some people just go around abusing you and it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't really say anything about you, and people are sick effectively. It's like people are really sick. Now, is it literal sickness like cancer? No. But it's good to think of it that way because that's effectively how it affects people. Like if your mom or dad had cancer, let's say you're a kid and your mom or dad had cancer and they were being a little bit short-tempered, right? Because they're under all this stress because I have cancer. I don't know am I going to be dead in 6 months? You would understand. You're like, oh, they're sick. They're responding to this thing that they can't control or they don't have immediate control over. And that's how people are. So anyways, the point is I would just take this intellectual framework that I have about preemptive violence and I go, I just wouldn't be traumatized. But a child doesn't have that. Right? So what happens is a child gets abused. It puts in this very stressful situation. And so now there is a split. Not a literal split, but there's a split effectively in the child's psyche. So now there's this healthy part of dealing with the world that's not abusing them, but then this unhealthy part that deals with the world that is abusing him and what part gets the most attention. So you split off, and it's the analogy that's often used. It's like, well, you just get like a different tint of the world, and it's not really the world, it's just how you see the world, and now you respond to everything with that tint in your glasses, your trauma glasses, right? Like so it's like codependence. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. So codependence, where does this come from? You get hurt when you're young, your needs are taken away, you don't know how to manage them, so the only way that you can deal in the world now is to just latch onto other people. Get validation from other people because you can't get your own needs yourself. Because when you were 5 and you were put in this, whatever precarious traumatic situation it was, you couldn't get your needs met. So now you're going around acting like a 5-year-old, even though you're an adult and you could potentially get your needs met. Like alcoholism or any kind of addiction. It's the same sort of thing. Isolation, can't get your needs met, can't learn to soothe yourself when you're a child, put in a stressful situation, can't soothe yourself. So now you take those glasses out into the real world. When you're an adult, you still can't soothe yourself, so you turn to a substance to numb the pain. And so this is how trauma works. And we split it off, and then we placate this part of us that was adapted to this one stressful situation, which was the correct adaptation at the time. Just shutting down, for instance. That's a great adaptation to not getting hurt more. Not so helpful when we're an adult. So what trauma consists of, in a sense, is a power figure. A powerful parent. There needs to be some sort of power imbalance. If I go out and get punched, if I walk out of my apartment today, there's no real power imbalance there, unless he's really huge and knocks me out or gives me serious brain damage. But that's physical trauma. We're obviously not talking about that. But there needs to be a parent. There needs to be a traumatic parent, a bad parent, an abusive parent, and that's what we need. If we're going to look at America's wars in the 20th century, we need a parent. We need a consolidation of power. And this is going to be not very politically correct, but I do think it's important to talk about. That consolidation of power came before the 20th century. I mean, it happened in a lot of different ways, but I think the main way that often doesn't, get enough blame for this, for obvious reasons you're going to see, is the Civil War. The North won the Civil War. And it was good because it ended slavery, of course. Obviously, slavery is really bad. But what it was really bad about the Civil War is it consolidated power. It strengthened the size of the federal government, made it much stronger. I mean, in terms of percentage of increase in power, the Civil War, the North winning the Civil War, and what that did to the federal government, how it strengthened it, it now created a parent for the American citizen. Somebody strong enough, somebody with enough power to exert force to cause trauma. That's what a parent is to a 2-year-old. A consolidation of power. And that's what happened in the Civil War. I think slavery would have ended anyway. I mean, obviously, look, the Civil War wasn't even about slavery, so take all that out of it. Don't even think about the slavery. Just understand there was a huge consolidation of power. And then what else do you need when there's a parent? You need a problem. You need some sort of addiction, right? You need a parent with their own trauma that's going to be much more likely to traumatize the child. And I think what happened there is again, lots of things happened, but the creation of the Federal Reserve is what this did. Is it gave unlimited resources to this addiction, in a sense, this power addiction, which we have no reason to think that a power addiction is any less powerful than any sort of substance addiction or emotional addiction. I mean, power is an emotion. So now you have this centralized, bad parent, traumatic parent, and the resources to fund their trauma. And so you get an abuse of power. I mean, there's no way you don't get an abuse of power in these situations. And that's what happened. I mean, it started with World War I. This was not our war. Nobody wanted to be in this war. But what did America do? As the trauma, as the bad parent, well, we'll give our allies resources, and we'll just kind of use our power, feel like the big person. Now, what's the explicit purpose of that? It's, we're trying to help them, we're trying to help people. No, it's about power. It's a codependent relationship about power, because you have this addiction already, thanks to the Civil War, and you have the means to fund it, thanks for mortgaging your children's future. Now it can be about power. Now you can put on this nice front, like every trauma parent does, even though it's about satisfying their own addiction, which sometimes with a trauma parent, it's about, feeling their power, feeling powerful over a child, abusing them as a result of that because they feel powerless in the world. And this isn't hindsight bias. I mean, these were principles that America was built on. The founding fathers, the founding father, George Washington, in his farewell address said, whatever that quotation was, good alliances, economic alliances with all, political alliances with none. Right. But he's speaking to somebody who doesn't have a power addiction. America, by the 19-teens, with the creation of the Federal Reserve, we had a power addiction. So now, it's not rational anymore. And that's what World War I was. They got us into World War I and, hoard out. I mean, this is terrible. This is terrible. We whore out our own young men for helping our allies right on the surface, but really it's about feeding some addiction of political leaders. It happens all the time, especially with, it just seems to be this thing with moms who are addicts. They whore out their daughters. It happens. I don't know if it's more than you think or less than you think. It happens. And that's what, and just the way that those, young girls who are whored out to their moms, drug dealers in a sense. Man. That's how America's been acting, and we've been running from that ever since. And then, like with World War II, with the draft, now there was a draft in World War I, but the draft in World War II, and it's like you have to fight because your father fought in World War I. The same thing happened between World War II and Vietnam. So these are the three wars I'm going to talk about. I know there's other ones like Korea and everything. The same principle applies, and this is traumatic reenactment. This is exactly what you see in trauma. The person who is traumatized, the father who is drafted in World War I or World War II, when their son is drafted and they don't go, they're conscientious objectors. They're looking at this trauma relationship for what it is and going, this isn't actually helpful for me. They're the ones who are demonized. The ones who are stepping outside the system and say, I don't know if this is healthy, going around and saving people. Who aren't us, just because we might disagree with them politically. I don't know if this benefits us in the long term. Now, you say that it does, right? Like you say that you're in Vietnam fighting communism, but it didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense logically. And we know from the Pentagon Papers that leaders knew this on some level. They knew it didn't make sense logically. But it was about the power. How can it just be about power? How can alcoholism just be about getting more alcohol? How could a cocaine addiction just be about getting more cocaine? Because it has an end to itself. It is its own end. And that's a very healthy, not a great way to think about power. It's just an accurate way to think about power. For the purpose of nation building, for spreading freedom. Oh God, every trauma parent has a great reason for traumatizing their children. There's always some great reason that they tell themselves, but really, it's just a front. It's just a deception. It's all about the denial. Oh, we're spreading freedom to Vietnam. Okay. It got really tricky with America because we were really powerful. We were a hegemony. Learned that word in political science class. So it worked. I mean, it worked in World War II. It worked in Korea to some degree, right? Yeah, it worked in Japan, right? Japan is America 2, South Korea is America 3. I mean, these countries would just not be where they are if it wasn't for, okay, let us go in and tell you how to, and for whatever reason, maybe cultural reasons, where they were, where those two cultures, where the Koreans and Japanese were before, it worked. Didn't work in Vietnam. Kind of did in the long run, but it was probably going to work out anyway. Definitely not working now in Afghanistan. And did it work in Iraq? I forget. And then you have the perpetuator of the trauma, JFK, symbol of American youth and vigor, said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This is the trauma parent. Do as I say, otherwise you're wrong. Sacrifice to me, otherwise you're wrong. This is exactly how trauma plays out. And this is how it gets perpetuated. Sacrifice, ask what you can do for your country. And then what do? And it's a false alternative. This is exactly what the trauma parent does. Either you're with me or against me. That's what that ask not what you can do for your, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. False alternative, right? If you don't play in to our traumatic past, then you are against us. If you do not sacrifice for this power, for this trauma parent, then you're an outsider. You're a conscientious objector. You're a coward. And so how do you break free of this? Well, we need more conscientious objectors, I guess. We need more people talking about what's really going on. We need more people to from the outside calling it exactly what it is. I mean, is it a political, or the 20th century war has been a political fumble? Yeah, but also psychologically, what else would we expect? This is how trauma works. And unless you call trauma exactly what it is, it's going to be perpetuated. And I think we have to really start to see how we have been affected by these things. And, just like any trauma survivor, you have to look at your situation. You're essentially going to develop a new identity because of managing this trauma. I guess I'm kind of petering out here. What was my point going to be? Yeah, look at the trauma. You're going to develop a new identity, so it's going to be scary. You don't want to develop a new identity. But yeah, essentially overcoming this trauma, you can talk about peace. Yeah, this is going to be my point. You can talk about peace and all this great stuff. That sounds really good. But what peace looks like in America, effectively, psychologically, is looking back on World War II and thinking, wow, that was a huge mistake. We really messed up. And we're not going to have a peaceful future in America, foreign policy-wise, until we can come to those kinds of insights. And I'll leave it there. It's my time. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. Tell a friend about this. Talk about what I talk about. And as always, I wish you all the joy and pain that comes from being in touch with reality.